In recent months, there has been a national discussion about history and what our children do and don't learn. The state of Minnesota is looking into that debate right now. So who decides what history is taught in our schools? Good question. Here's Heather Brown.
How do you decide what to teach?
Yeah, well, I think it's a collaborative effort.
Mr. Ismail teaches world history and African American studies at Anoka High School.
For me, I look at voices that haven't been, heard in history.
Mr. Rexroth teaches U.S. and European history at Hopkins.
I think if you're excited about it and you can get kids excited about it, that's the bottom line.
Like all the teachers I talked with, they start with the social studies standards and benchmarks set by the state. Here's a video explaining just one of the many benchmarks.
Fifth grade students examine the establishment of a government for the new nation.
We use those as the basis for what we do. We marry that together with the curriculum that we use, that we are given from our district.
Then, in many cases, that curriculum is passed through the schools and to the teachers. How much autonomy do you have as a teacher?
I have some, the flexibility is there. We all follow the standards pretty closely. But once you're in the classroom, there's room there for you to have conversations with students to talk about the connection between the past and the present.
Every 10 years, the Minnesota Department of Education is required by law to review and revise its standards. A decade ago, just one of the changes in the social studies standards was an increased focus on personal finance and technology. This year, MDE's goal is that the standards would become more culturally responsive and culturally affirming. To do that, there's a review committee working now. It's made up of 44 teachers, administrators, college faculty, and community members from across the state.
There's a very wide range of diverse backgrounds.
Beth Tepper is one of those committee members. She's the director of education for the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community.
My goal and hope is that we can make change by changing the narrative and including an accurate portrayal of what it is to be Native American in Minnesota.
Right now, many history classes use textbooks. Mr. Rexroth calls them a resource.
We don't usually, most of us don't cover it by chapter, by section.
That students supplement with other sources. Mr. Ismail says the textbooks can be a help.
But I make it clear that our textbooks have bias. They talk about some things, they don't talk about other things.
He encourages his students to look for other sources that share different perspectives. Both teachers ask their students to be critical of what they hear and read.
The hard part with the standards is to write them broadly enough to include what's important, but also to really understand what is the core of what kids must know and must be exposed to understand our country.
He says that's sometimes going to be political, sometimes logistically hard. And Mr. Ismail says it will require some changes in how history has been taught.
We need to, constantly push ourselves to, ask questions, critique history, and, learn from our mistakes, but also learn from the differences that people share.
Heather Brown, WCCO 4 News.
The Standards Review Committee has come up with its first draft. The public is invited to offer feedback later this month in virtual town halls and in an online form. We have the information on how to do that on WCCO.com.